going on, guys? Today I wanted to kind of lighten things up because the last video got just a little bit emotional. But before I do that, though, we are still going to have a slight bit of emotion here because I recently found out that a prominent member of the haunt community within the Kentuckiana, Ohio Valley area recently passed. And it was not something that anyone saw coming. So it's kind of heartbreaking because I knew it was Melinda Collins and her husband Gary are very big in the haunt community. If you've gone to Transworld, then you've seen them around. I mean, they're great people. They're beautiful people. But apparently Melinda recently passed. And that was incredibly surprising because she's not a whole lot younger than me. And that just, it was surprising and it's heartbreaking. And I feel so bad for Culberson Mansion and for Gary especially. I couldn't imagine what you're going through right now, and I'm so sorry for that. So this episode is going to be dedicated to Melinda and Gary. I hope you're doing okay, friend. So today we're going to be looking at some of the worst situations to happen while working at a haunt from 2016. I don't know how true it is, but I'm just going through here and reading some of these stories and just wow. It's from a Reddit. Apparently it's from some kind of Reddit post. Anyway, I just lost it. Yeah, it was on a Reddit post from 2016, but still, these are some pretty crazy stories. So let's go ahead and jump into it, and I'll give a couple opinions on things that happen. All right, number one. I gave a girl a seizure one time. Okay. That night, I was standing in a hallway dressed like an insane asylum inmate with gouged out eyes. And I had a little buzzer in my hand I could press to make the hall's strobe lights buzz and a long sound go off. So, clackers. Okay. I pressed the buzzer as a woman entered with her boyfriend, and at first I thought she was shaking with fear. Nope, seizure. I broke character and escorted them out the secret door and flagged down a manager. I'm sure seeing a creepy chick with gouged out eyes trying to lead you somewhere was alarming for the couple. I'm not sure what happened after the ambulance came, but I heard she was on drugs, and the company I was working for didn't get sued, so I assume/hope she's fine. Clackers. Seizures are a big problem, which is why most haunted houses... I honestly, I don't think it was drugs. I think the girl very much had epilepsy, which is a big problem. And sometimes people can go through a haunted house with epilepsy and be fine. Sometimes they go through and they're not fine. It just depends. But that's the thing with with the clackers, is that's the risk that you take. And that's why most haunted houses have the sign out front that says flashing lights, strobe lights, things like that. If you have seizures, don't do this. Next up, we have another story, this one from an EMT. When I was training for my EMT, I had to do a shift in the emergency room. Just watching, maybe helping do some simple stuff. Okay. I picked the night before Halloween. All right. I mean, I don't know how smart that is, but whatever. It turned out to be a sad night. Ooh. I was 18 years old, and they brought in a 16 or 17-year-old kid they had stabilized in the ambulance. He was working at one of the local scare places, posing as someone who had been hanged. He fell with a rope around his neck and actually hung himself. Jesus, people. I remember seeing his x-rays, and you could see where there was a gap between the vertebrae. The doctor just pointed to it and said he could not tell how bad it was, but he might have become a paraplegic that night. I hope to God he got better. Oh, wow. Oh, jeez. Whenever it comes to scares like that, you have to be careful. I hate hanging scenes because I always worry how they're doing it. One of the haunts that I worked for had a hanging scene, but the hanging scene at this place worked out great because it was someone who would jump out of a window, drop down, and it looked like that they had, just committed suicide right there in front of you. But what it actually was is the person was wearing a harness underneath of their costume, and the rope was actually attached to the harness and not the rope. The rope was on a breakaway system, so that if the harness failed, the rope would just go pink and just fall down. I've also seen haunts who don't take those safety precautions into consideration, and it always terrifies me. Oh God, it just scares the hell out of me. Safety, people, safety. I worked one haunted house, I guess, in high school, my junior year. I wore a black skin suit, morph suit, so that I was basically invisible in the low light of the house. I was told that I wasn't to physically touch any of the visitors to the haunted house. Standard rule. The organizer placed me at the end of the house in a hallway with open rafters above me. I hung onto the rafters and waited for someone to show up. About an hour into my shift, a group of teenagers showed up, and as I had many times before, I dropped from the rafters and howled at them. All right. The fun part about this group was... the fun part about this group of teenagers is that they were packing knives. They all pulled them out, and one shouted at me, "Who's scared now?" To which I promptly said, "That would be me." Yeah. I backed against the wall, and the group walked past me. Thank God. A few minutes later, the on-duty police officer, it's off-duty police officer, came by and asked how I was, and I told him what happened. When my shift ended 30 minutes later, I found the officer helping the kids that pulled the knives on me into his and another police car. There's always an X factor. You can't always plan for everything. Honestly, that's probably what this person did is probably the best thing to do. There's a reason why one of the guys that I learned from, he called guests cattle for lots of reasons. And one of those reasons being that people are stupid and they do stupid stuff. Next up, the worst thing I've seen at my haunt didn't actually have anything to do with us being a haunted house. We had rain, wind, and hail one night and didn't get the message out fast enough to get everyone to safety. A metal sign came loose and hit a woman, a customer, not a worker, over the head at what we believe to be 40 miles per hour. Oh! She had a concussion and spent the night in the hospital, but she was fine in the end and didn't take legal action. That's good. Other than that, I've seen people cry, have panic attacks. I saw a guy get scared and bite his presumed girlfriend's dude bit his girlfriend's shoulder. One of our actors was kicked in the head by another actor who was swinging from a rope. Oh, I got a story for you. Workers who cut themselves while preparing sets. That's standard. Stuff happens. Customers who've gone out of their way to get into actor-only areas who've gotten hurt. There's a reason why you don't go in there. I've been kicked. Actors are pretty frequently punched, and frequently, almost once a night, people corner smaller or younger actors and comment that they're sexy, ask for dates/sex, try to touch, and breathe their beer breath on you. Somehow the job is still fun and I keep going back. Yeah, it sounds like standard haunted house work. Two things I want to touch on that one. Yeah, if you're a haunted house guest, don't go drunk. Don't go high. Because for some reason, you seem to have this idea that you're untouchable. And if you cause a ruckus, guess what? You're going to jail. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that, because I could go on about how stupid guests can be. But yeah, anyway, my other story, absolutely hilarious. When I was younger, I worked at a haunt in Kentucky. It was actually, it was a haunt at a pretty well-known place. If you've seen ghost hunting shows, you've seen this place. And they do a yearly haunted house. And one year, I went in, and my room I was supposed to swing down on a rope and, drop down and basically do a pirate scare, rah, to the guests as they came in the room. So one time I swing down and I swung down just a little too hard and smack right into the wall and just drop. And I'm just laying there, laid out, just completely splayed. And I look up, and the people are just sitting there looking at me. So I'm like, just step over me. Just step over me. 1 year, long story short. In other words, it's going to be a long story. 1 year, long story short. I was working in a gypsy camp in the forest, and I dressed in drag, full makeup, long hair, stuffed bra. I was actually a little too passable as a woman. I would hide my lower face behind my hair, and the two women I was working with would proposition men coming through to see if they wanted to buy their sister/me. I would let the hair away from my face. This was my idea, as I thought the gypsy camp was boring as it is, and spiced it up a little bit. It went well. We had a drunk group of frat boys come through one night, and one of them was a bit intoxicated and very interested in the prospect of purchasing their sister. He very aggressively grabbed me and began rubbing up on me. He grabbed my ass, had a hand moving towards my fake breasts when he brushed up against a surprise. He jumped back and screamed, F that. That's a effing man. I felt his D. That's a man. I let my hair down right then. His friends immediately began making fun of him. You grabbed the guy's D? He's not saying D. He's saying the actual word. I said that's not all. That's not all he grabbed. The guy was clearly a bit homophobic and a bit upset, and his friends were really giving him hell. Security saw it happen and offered to throw him out. I said, nah, I think he learned his lesson. But if he gives anyone else any trouble, toss him. I really wish I had a video of that happening. So do I. I'd love to see that. That'd be great. Teenage black female apparently had an immense fear of clowns. She wasn't aware we had clowns in our room. They sort of resembled the clowns from Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Their job is to basically jump out from blind spots and startle people. She was so scared she Code brown, code yellow. If you know anything about haunting, you know what that means. Then passed out and busted her head open. Wow. Wow. By the way, here's a plug. This podcast called Code Yellow Podcast. It's my boy Jared and his friends. And they get on there and talk about haunting. Go listen to them. Okay. In one haunted house I know of, the owner wasn't getting enough visits. So he hired a young business consultant who had recently graduated from a top business school in Canada. Shoot me in the fucking face. The advice convinced people who were visiting that they had contracted a serious respiratory disease. This meant, in part, having a fake biohazard team in bubble suits come in and escort them away in a very convincing and somewhat horrifying way. The idea was to upset someone so badly that they would then sue the haunted house. It would become a news story. Haunted house sued for being too scary, assuring the business a lot of visits. I'm not sure how it ended though, or if the plan worked. I can tell you right now it didn't work. Because people don't take stuff seriously, especially in haunted houses. That's honestly the reason why I always tell people, don't go too realistic. If you go too realistic, then you're shooting yourself in the head. Okay? I understand the need for doing something new and different, but when you go too realistic, you are causing a problem, because what if something really happened? And you had this reputation for being the too realistic place. Something actually happens, then next thing you know, we're having an 84 house fire all over again. Okay? You got to be smart about this stuff. Yes, be scary. Yes, try to get more people in. Don't be stupid. I helped a guy who was walking through with his arms around his girlfriend in front of him. And she got startled and threw her head back and broke his nose. Well, that sure wasn't our fault. We warned people against walking like that due to that danger. Exactly. Be careful. Be careful. Tell your haunt guests that if you're going to walk that close, you better be ready to take blows from each other. I think I'm just going to leave that joke alone. Once a girl got startled and took off running all the way to the exit, where she ran through the curtain right into a brick wall. They brought her to me with blood streaming down her face, and at first I thought it was great makeup job. All right. Again, not our fault. After that, we started planning ahead, and now we use foam to wrap every hard surface the public might come into contact with. Every hard surface the public might come into contact with. Sorry, I read that wrong. Just in case. That's actually a really good idea. But suffice to say, I think that that's a really good idea, because one of the biggest stories that I've heard from people who share stories about haunts are guests who get just a little too over the top and take off running and smack into walls. I've got a story, hilarious story, that I'll probably tell you here in a second. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and pad those walls. But anyway, my story is, one time I was working at a haunted house at a theme park, and my job, it was a butcher type room. The guest would come in on the left, like this way. I would be right here in a little boo hole with a slab of beef in front of me. As they would come in, I would slam the slab of beef down, come out, do my scare, and, look at them, and then scare. One time, One time I did that and I slammed the beef down and I look over and this dude just like straight runs his girlfriend over. Big old huge guy, little bitty girl. And she just flattens out. She just goes flat because he pushes her, runs her over, runs into the next room, pow, right into the wall. And this wasn't a brick wall, it was a plywood wall. But still, it was enough to cause the wall to be pushed back a good foot. You know, they had to go in and repair it, everything, and but yeah, it was good times. At the end of the forest, there were guys in hockey masks with chainsaws who chased you out of the forest. When they burst out, a father grabbed his 6 or 7 year old son and holds onto him and yells, "Get this one, it's his birthday!" and begins pushing his young son towards the chainsaw guys. We sold these glow sticks that were about as big around as a baseball bat handle and probably half a foot long. Okay, so not that long, pretty big. Okay. And this kid had one. He spun around, clocked his dad square in the temple with it, and dad goes down hard. Lights out. The chain guys come running towards the dad and the kid, partly because it's their job and partly to check on the dad. So the kid screams, "You can't catch me! Get him!" Throws the glow stick at the chainsaw guys and runs like a madman out of the forest. Dad, still unconscious on the floor. Paramedics came in, checked him out. He was okay, but they took him in to check for a concussion. It wasn't funny when it happened. It's funny now. But looking back on it, I laughed my ass off when I run into one of the other guys who were there and asked them if they remember that. That's great. There was one time I smashed a metal fireplace shovel in half. I've been doing it all night. Oh, there you go. When I hit it on the ground for one tour, the thing finally snapped and they all damn near shat themselves because it made me look like a small girl with a beastly strength. That's great. I love it. There was another time when I was telling this group of girls to exit my room. They were in a corner on the floor, crying their eyes out and screaming. Every time I told them to leave, they'd flip out more. It was to the point that multiple tours were about to run into each other because they wouldn't leave. I helped out at a haunted jail once. I was working the electric chair dude. So I'm thinking probably like an animatronic or something like that. You hit the switch and, you know, that sort of thing. Right next to me was a cell that 3 girls aged 10 to 13 were hiding in to scream at people walking by. I was pretty amusing. It was pretty amusing until they scared this one macho dude. He rushed at the bars and started swinging at the little girls, shouting, "I'm gonna kill you. Yeah, female dogs." The girls were terrified and huddled in the back of the cell. Security threw the a-hole out. I don't know if the cops were called. I hope so. Yes, I hope so too. Because, once again, just because you're in a show doesn't give you a right to do that stuff. I think I'm going to do one more, and then we'll save the other ones for another video. So, yeah. Last one for now. I worked at a haunted house, I worked at a haunted forest some years back. It had been raining pretty steadily that October, so the trails were pretty muddy and slick. At one point along the trail, a dude with a chainsaw surprised people as they came around a bend before a relatively steep descent. I've watched a man throw his daughter to the side of the trail at that point and take off running, then sliding, then rolling. Seriously, kids, get a job at a scare place if you have the chance. Getting paid to scare people is fantastic. I can't help but agree. I love scaring people. I love it so much. I love it so much that I'm even willing to put up with, stupid guests that don't know to keep their hands to themselves. Yeah. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this. What is the worst thing that's ever happened to you while you were working at a haunt? Leave your story down below. Worst thing that ever happened to me? Let's see here. Worst thing that ever happened to me. I actually broke my arm in working in a haunt. The way that it was is the guest walks along a certain area, and we were kind of set down. Like, the guest floor is up here, our floor was down here, so that we could reach through and be grabbing at their feet and everything. There was one time that we were doing this, and the guests were coming through, and we reached through like we're supposed to, and we're grabbing at the feet, and all of a sudden, one of the guests just like football punts my arm, and there were bar slats in between that we were reaching through, so and just football punts my arm against one of these slats. Well, I heard it snap, and I just felt this searing pain just shoot right through my arm. And the guests go through, and I pull my arm back in, and I looked at my partner, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I just broke my arm. No, it was my own fault, because, I was getting a little too into it, and, kind of figured that something like this was going to happen at some point. As a matter of fact, I was thinking, just like earlier that day, I was thinking, man, if we keep doing this, somebody's going to get hurt. Sure enough, it was me. I broke my arm, and the way that the house was laid out was that at first the guest walks through and they're on the outside of the cage, and then eventually they walk through and find themselves on the inside of the cage. So I'm sitting there, busted arm, and the guests are now coming back, where now we are to sit there and act like, ha, you are now in here with us, and blah, blah, blah. And instead, I was so angry that, I went through, and my arm was broken. I'm going through, and, I'm like, move, you. Be more careful. That's all I could say. I was like, just be more careful. Because honestly, it was kind of my fault. But as soon as they left, I went out, left the area, told my partner, I was like, hey, I've got to go take care of this. Went out, told the owner, I was like, hey, I think I just broke my arm. I'm going to go see the medic. And went over to the medic and got to have a sweet little trip to the hospital. That was fun. Not really. That sucked. That sucked bad. But yeah, how about you? What is the worst situation that ever happened to you while you were working at a haunted house? Leave it in the comments below, and maybe we'll do another episode because I have a bunch more stories on this list to go through. So, yeah. Maybe we'll toss yours in there as well. So, yeah. With that, guys, have fun and just keep haunting.